Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Crypto Combos. I'm your host, MK Lords, and joining me today is the always interesting Brian Sovereign from Sovereign Tech. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different things today, so it should be really exciting. I'm a big fan of his podcast. Everyone should check it out. It's really, really awesome. So how are you doing today, Brian?
Doing great, and to say always interesting, that's might be the nicest thing I've ever heard said about me, so thank you. I usually get like always inflammatory, or I get always insane, always crazy, something like that. So interesting, that's good. I'll take it.
Well, I think your stuff's pretty rational. I definitely wouldn't call it insane. So
Appreciate that. Yeah. So definitely probably inflammatory at times. So if you want to hear crazy things, yeah, listening to Sovereign Tech is a great, or not crazy, but wild things. Good place to go.
it's wild and intelligent. It's a good combination of both. So I really like that. So
Yeah, I like to think so.
awesome. So what I always like to ask guests first is what has kind of been their philosophical progression? Where did you kind of start, and how did you kind of end up to where you are now philosophically?
Ooh boy, I'll try and make this as brief as possible. I usually crack the joke that I'm on my third life right now because it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride. I was when I was young, I was literally known. I went to a lot of conventions after I turned like 17, and my mother kind of turned me loose, and I literally got the title of King of the Nerds. Like I was this, this is before the internet, or I mean, the internet was there, but it wasn't like Wikipedia and Google, where you could find answers to things. And so if you're really good at quizzes and you knew a lot of trivia, you became kind of popular. And so I became really popular on the convention circuit, really all over the place. And I started traveling, it kind of became such a thing in the U.S. because I grew up in New York. I started traveling to other countries as well, and that was a real eye-opener for me. And in fact, I think for a lot of people, one of the very first best things that they can do, especially perhaps for their, if they have families and they have children or something like that, is for people to experience other countries. Because if you only know countries through the boob tube, through television or even through the internet, you're not seeing how everybody's really the same and how everybody has problems. They just come in different languages wherever you go. And so that was really eye-opening for me to see that. And I think that definitely laid the real foundation to first off have the independence of being allowed to travel on my own at what some would consider a young age, and then also to really see the world at a pretty young age. That definitely really it really helps you sift through the bullshit that you get on television and that you get on the internet even today, and all of that. So, but unfortunately, the one bit of bullshit I did fall for is I joined the U.S. Army after 9/11. And I'm ethnically Jewish. I'm an atheist, but I was raised in that. And there was it's just I'll make it as quick as I can because it's kind of a funny thing because a lot of people talk about like this 9/11 truth movement and how it brings so many people to the liberty movement. Well, it actually turned me into a statist. I was well on my way to becoming an anarchist at the time. I was already hanging out with cypherpunks and all that at a pretty young age. But then, when I saw that happen, and then you had a lot of these truth movement people saying, oh, the Jews were behind it and all this stuff, and I was just like, what, are you crazy? I'm like, I'm not behind anything. And it was all this very, collectivist kind of language around it. And so, I wanted to go prove my patriotism, and so I joined the U.S. Army. But fortunately, I got out of that after a couple of years. Which was early for me, and which I'm very glad that occurred. And that's really where I had a lot of my philosophical awakening was in the Army, because you just realize I was in PSYOPs, just psychological operations, and so you're a propaganda man, and that pretty much means you need to lie to the indigenous people wherever you happen to be to make them think that the U.S. are the good guys. And so when you get enough of that, suddenly you just start seeing the patterns that you've been taught in just about everything, everywhere you look around you. And so when I saw, you start to see those patterns, then you realize just how much crap is getting fed more and more and more. And so that happened. The military, not a good experience. I became religious again in the military, unfortunately, and then I thought I wanted a family and all this stuff, and so I had like a 7-year time period where I lived a very conventional life that most people that know me now wouldn't believe I ever led a life of that nature, being like this hardline Christian and all this stuff. But fortunately, I woke up out of that. Thankfully, through a lot of things like Ron Paul, Free Talk Live was really, really, which I actually had the pleasure of co-hosting for 2 years, which was kind of the boyhood dream come true, And Free Talk Live really opened me up to a lot of these ideas, started me down the path. And then I found a whole slew of other podcasts, Pork Therapy, Complete Liberty. I mean, you go down the list of just incredible, stuff that's out there that you can reach into, and eventually, inside of a couple of years, I became an atheist anarchist, to put it simply, and got very much back interested into. I was working for tech companies at the time, but then Free Talk Live also taught me about Bitcoin. I learned about Bitcoin, I took it seriously because of Free Talk Live. Like I had seen it on message boards and all that being talked about for a couple of years, but when it was getting like real marketing, which is a big thing for Bitcoin. Like, I don't think people do this enough. They don't market Bitcoin enough, and it really needs to be necessary. And there's a lot of commentators out there that say the same, that it's really missing. Like, why isn't it just exploding? Well, it's because nobody's reaching out to television, to radio, to whatever. Because when I heard it on the radio, which Free Talk Live is a radio show, I mean, I took it very, very seriously. So that's really what got me to that point. I mean, there's a million other like books I could talk about that I read that really solidified, my anarchism, and my interest in cryptography and things like that. But that's the long road. So I have a lot of experience seeing the world, being in the Army, living the conventional life, and just realizing that all of it is nonsense. So we need something else.
That's fascinating. Yeah, you really have been all over the place and gone, it changed a whole lot. And I love talking to people who have that experience too, who don't just stay fixed in one ideology their whole lives, or, they switch over because, there was a long time that, I was a hardcore leftist and, I thought that was like the way and that, anything else opposed to that, like I just couldn't process. And I'm really thankful for the friends I had and just, the books I was able to read and the experiences I had that kind of pushed me away from that kind of authoritarian mindset.
Sure, yeah, I was a Democrat too. I mean, even when I moved to New Hampshire in 2011 for the Free State Project, because you got to do, you want to do something about your principles, be it, doing a show like you do, MK, or you're on the Fiends, the Freedom Fiends as well. Your principles put you into action. And even when I came to New Hampshire, I was still registered to Democrats. So, I mean, I can understand coming from that left. And there's things to learn from that, I think. I think there's unique perspectives to bring along with that, because we know the whole left-right paradigm is crap. But, it's really impressive, and kudos to you, for coming from that and kind of seeing the light, more or less. So I can really understand that.
Yeah, and Bitcoin has been an entirely new world too. And so you found out about Bitcoin through listening to Free Talk Live, and you'd heard about it before, though. What were your initial thoughts when you first heard about it?
My initial thoughts, admittedly, were some degree of skepticism. There was a book by Peter Ludlow written in 2001. I think it was Pirate Utopias, Cyber States, something like that. That was the name of the book. It was really good, and I figured it was that becoming implemented. But a lot of the in Peter Ludlow, now he's just the editor for this book, but a lot of the writings in that book were kind of immature. In their concepts. Not to say they were bad, but they were kind of immature. So I was a little concerned. I was like, yeah, I get it, but I'm a little worried, A, that there's a little few too many chances for this to get taken out way too early, and maybe no one's just ever going to take it that seriously. And then of course there's a case of e-gold, where really terrible things happened in that case, and to the people that created it, that were just trying to very much like Satoshi wanting to free the world, free the monetary system, whatever. And yeah, so I was a little skeptical of it, and I'll admit I'm actually a little because again I found it through libertarian circles. I'm a little shocked that libertarians really latched onto it so quickly. Like they really had no, and I don't know if that's because again Free Talk Live is such an authority, or I don't want to say authoritarian, but such an authority, or they're so well respected in liberty circles. but like they didn't think for 2 seconds, hey, maybe this is like some kind of government plot or ploy. I'm actually impressed, and I don't think it is. I'm just saying that I'm impressed that it was so quickly taken on from such a skeptical group of people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I did notice some skepticism and conspiracy theorizing around it a little bit, but not as much as you would think. But yeah, I have heard several people and I've gotten the question a lot. Well, what if Satoshi is like the NSA? What if it's government? And I mean, yeah, what if okay, the technology's out there, it's in the hands of the people now and can be used in a lot of different ways. So yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, even religious people, this is the part where Bitcoin, like I think the evidence for Bitcoin being a government plot, is, or a corporatist plot, whatever phrase you want to use, is kind of slim. Okay, I've seen it. I've read a couple articles. People try to put together a case. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the religious one, particularly like the Christian case, is interesting. That there's lots of Christian. I mean, they just jumped right on board. Which really blew my mind. And I used to be, to some degree, a biblical scholar. And actually, kind of humorously, I'm working on my doctorate of divinity right now. Again, I am an atheist. but regardless, like the Book of Revelation, it talks about. It never says there's a one world government. It says that there would be a one world economy. That's how it literally describes it. And so I'm shocked that there weren't more religious people that said, hey, this Bitcoin thing is going to be that one currency to rule them all. This isn't good. In fact, I noticed O'Reilly. Now I think they changed the name of this book, but there was a book getting released by O'Reilly, and they're putting out a lot of Bitcoin books. And one of them was called Bitcoin, the New World Currency. And I was like, what marketing moron decided to say New World Currency? I mean, because that's so close to saying New World Order. It's a nightmare to do that. But as I understand it, because when you click the link for that book now, and it goes to Amazon where you can pre-order it, comes out in February, they changed the name to Blockchain, the New Economy, which sounds a lot less incendiary from a religious perspective, in my opinion. But that shocks me too, though, is that there isn't more religious people that are very, very, kind of your apocalyptic types, very concerned about Bitcoin. So yeah, just shocking.
Yeah, I've met a couple, that have expressed to me, some of those concerns coming from, at least in this area, there's a lot more Christian fundamentalism. So I have heard people, ask me about that with that concern in mind. But I don't think it is, what they're worried about, basically. And so you mentioned marketing earlier. What are some other things, what are some other ways that Bitcoin can be more efficiently marketed towards people?
Well, I'm playing against my own hand, because I'm one of those rare guys that doesn't want Bitcoin to grow. I want Bitcoin to have value, and I want Bitcoin to exist. I just don't. People don't need Bitcoin to, if you want to buy something online, use PayPal. You've already got it. You already have this whole system that can, and the whole system's nonsense, but then a lot of Bitcoin people are just going back into that system. A lot of these companies seem to want to be working within that system, which is crazy to me, because that goes against the whole beauty of the technology in the first place. So I'm one of those guys that really, again, I don't really want it to grow in the first place. But as far as like areas, I mean, the marketing was the question, the marketing that it can do.
Well, in what ways can it be marketed more efficiently than it is now?
Yeah, I think it's really, well, for one, like they keep talking about making the apps easier to use and for grandma to use and all of this stuff. And I was at a conference and I asked this question. I was like, don't you think that Bitcoin should be getting marketed towards, and there was a panel up there, Brock Pierce and all these guys, and I was like, don't you think you should be like reaching out to radio and all this stuff? And they just said it's too early. It's too early. And I think that's nonsense. Real marketing, and I'm actually an ad exec, so I know a thing or two about marketing. Marketing has to be a very slow build. Now, Bitcoin's had that for a while, where it was a very slow build. Probably the smartest thing to ever happen to Bitcoin, and I'm not touting, Free Talk Live or anything, in this regard, but the fact is that Gavin Andresen went to Ian and Mark, who are the hosts of that show, and said, I've got this. I would love for you guys to talk about this. And he was a fan of Free Talk Live. And so he created, you want to, the word cult is a nasty word by and large, okay? But in marketing, it's a positive word. It's your end goal that you want. And so to get a cult, you have to have this slow build. You have to build up people, grassroots, really slowly. And the thing is that grassroots, as you can clearly see, is already, here, come and gone. So now it is time to get on radio, to do what Wegmans does, to do what Trader Joe's does. Get on radio, get on television. Television would be a huge thing that Bitcoin needs to get involved in, because if you already have these apps that make it so easy for grandma to use, well, grandma's got to hear about it. Grandma's not, yeah, I get it. Grandma's on Facebook, but Facebook's filtering all, just about every ad out there unless you're hashing out, millions of dollars a year anyway. So she's not going to hear about it that way. You've got to go through traditional means, and that's it. That may not be, I think that's the most efficient way for growth if you want it to grow. And again, I don't necessarily want grandma to use it. I want it to help the people, around the world. I want it to help anarchists, activists, and whoever, the system keeps on screwing. Like in California, you have, porn stars that are getting their bank accounts, shut off for no reason whatsoever. And I want those people helped because they're perfectly legitimate businesses, okay? And especially there. Granted, I understand there's only 2 states where porn is legal in the U.S., and that's California and New Hampshire. Yeah, New Hampshire. But okay, but they're legitimate. They're legal. That's the very nature of legitimate. And so for those people to be getting screwed by the system shows the fallacy of the system, but also it shows the importance of where Bitcoin is needed. It's actually not needed, for whatever. Pick the company, Lowe's or Home Depot. I don't know. None of these people need this. It's where it's needed. It's already getting well used. But yeah, if the question is where to market, well, again, it's just TV and radio. People got to spend. You got to spend money to make money. It's a truism, but it's true. And if you spend the money there, the people will come. So whether I like it or not.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen the FIFA ad that was geared towards television, but I think it's an excellent way to market. Are you familiar
Agreed.
with the FIFA team? The Troll,
I love
please.
those guys.
Oh yeah, Les Pilar, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they did an excellent job with their commercial. And actually here in Pensacola, I have a commercial on the radio, a Bitcoin commercial, and it's focused on the charity aspect of Bitcoin. And that's actually directed a lot of calls. I work at Robertson Roberts during the day. It's precious metals, but we're also big Bitcoin enthusiasts. So we're constantly, we'll be taking calls from people who are curious about Bitcoin, and they want to know more about it. And we have the quick start guides out and stuff like that. But I do think you make a really good point when you say that maybe this isn't something that needs to be used at Starbucks, to buy your coffee with, or just buy, these random things. I kind of see Bitcoin as a tool to affect social change of some kind. And while I don't look down on people who buy, who buy coffee or whatever with Bitcoin, I think it has greater
Sure.
implications. So what are some of the other ways you see Bitcoin kind of changing things, outside just consumerism, kind of buying things?
Other ways that it changes things, well, it's really, and this is a point that can't get talked about enough. And the first time I heard it was from a great blogger, and he actually does a lot of the Bitcoin conventions as well. That's Steve Michaels. And he says, you got to understand, this is really the very first unit, the very first commodity, or, monetary unit, I guess is the best word, that actually you own. It's not, no government's telling you that it's legal and legit and you can have it or whatever. There's no central authority telling you that it's yours. You own it. You got it. You own it. And that's a big deal. Even gold I don't think necessarily matches up to that in many ways. So in that regard, that's huge, is that you finally have some form of tangible medium of exchange that you genuinely, no bank, none of that stuff. And, that's something else too, is, a lot of these companies really, they're running to the banks to want to work with the banks, a lot of Bitcoin companies. And that's a problem too, that they're totally missing the ball, is that banks aren't needed. They're not necessary at all. And so I think the irony is that Bitcoin allows pretty much every financial instrument that we understand today, that's on Wall Street or whatever, and it shows that none of them are necessary, and in fact, maybe they're all scams. This includes even the stock market and all that stuff. But the irony is that everybody is figuring out, or is trying to figure out, how to make Bitcoin work within that system. And it's a fool's errand. I mean, it's probably gonna happen, but at the same time, I think there's things far more efficient at doing this job, like Apple Pay and a slew of others. Google Wallet. Google just bought SoftCard or SoftBank, or yeah, SoftCard, not SoftBank. That's a Japanese company. But SoftCard, which is a wallet system. I mean, all these people are getting involved in that, and in my opinion, Apple Pay is going to put the kibosh on pretty much any wild dream. As far as in the standard system, the conventional financial system that we know that Bitcoin could be a part of. Now, I mean, it seems like there's always two, and maybe Bitcoin will be the other one and Apple Pay will be the other. But that's not meant to be a dire warning, because at the same time, that just means Bitcoin gets used by the people that actually need it. Yeah, I guess that's really what does Bitcoin say to everything? It says that really the financial system as we know it doesn't need to exist the way that it does. And I mean, one could get into like blockchain technology in general, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Well, yeah, there is this huge debate among people in Bitcoin of, how much do you put your foot into the legacy system and try to kind of, work that so you kind of are angling for a main, mass adoption angle, or how much should you stick to principles and, you just what's in the white paper and like using Bitcoin for, in other ways, being your own bank, things like that. So I wanted to ask you about the recent $75 million injection into Coinbase. Do you view this as a good thing for getting mainstream acceptance of Bitcoin, or did they just get hacked by Wall Street?
Is it a good thing for mainstream acceptance? Yes. Did they get hacked by Wall Street? Yes. So the answer is the same for both. But then, the caveat is like I was saying, is mainstream acceptance a good thing? Certainly, I don't know that anybody would be happy that Wall Street's getting involved. Well, okay, lots of people would be happy that Wall Street's getting involved, but a lot of people, a lot of early adopters of Bitcoin probably don't want them there at all. I would assume, but there's a bigger problem. I mean, with any of these, technologies or whatever they happen to be, or Coinbase doing what they do, and I don't mean to necessarily insult them. I've used their service often, and they're great. But at the same time, as soon as you start bringing that money in, strings are attached with so much of this money, and I get very worried. Like in fact, there's the side chains like with Blockstream that they're trying to develop side chains and all this. I mean, the instant I read that one of the VCs, some of that money that came into them, it was like 21 million, which is pennies, I guess, compared to 75. But one of the guys involved was Eric Schmidt. I'm like, Eric Schmidt. This is the guy that says if you're doing something, if what you're doing is wrong, maybe you shouldn't be, or if what you're doing you don't want people to see, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. I mean, one of the big taglines, albeit inaccurate, one of the big taglines of Bitcoin was anonymity. You want, it was supposed to be anonymous, however far you could push it. And, but Eric Schmidt is the antithesis of anonymity. He is the antithesis of really everything that I would get out of a white paper or out of the correspondence that I saw, from Satoshi Nakamoto. So when these people come in with all that money, it's not for free. Nothing's for free in reality. And so when somebody comes in with $75 million, somebody wants a return on that. And they don't want to wait 50 years for the world to change to get that return. They want it now. And the only way you can speed up a financial deal in reality is by the government favoring you within the paradigm, within the system that you exist. So bad thing, very bad.
Well, and it's pretty concerning, too, considering the amount of data and information Coinbase collects on merchants, for example. If you're an individual using the service, it's not a whole lot of personal information that you have to sacrifice, but if you're a business owner, it's quite a bit more, actually. Yeah. And I view that as a serious conflict. They're sitting on a pile of data that's, asking business owners much more than even banks are asking.
Right, and that's an issue too, because that was one of the initial selling points, even from other companies like blockchain.info or blockchain.com, whatever, blockchain. All these other companies, as they were pushing to you merchant apps that were, and part of the reason they were pushing that to you is like, look, no, you can start your business right up, and you can get using Bitcoin. You don't have to worry about regulations. You don't have to worry about this. And they didn't mind using a lot of that verbiage either. And then Coinbase comes in and starts saying, okay, please send us your soul, a DNA sample while you're at it, and take your pick of all these things. And it's like you see, and it's documented on the internet. That's, I guess, one of the good things about the internet is that at least for right now, not so many things are getting deleted unless you're in Europe and using Google. Okay, and you can see that there was a total attitude change at some point. And people don't realize is what allowed Bitcoin to get to its present critical mass, not that it's at a critical mass, I suppose some would say, but what allowed it to get there in the first place, but what allowed it to get there was the complete lack of regulation. And so if you're looking for this thing to grow more, just copy what made it big in the first place. Don't mess with success. And yet Coinbase and a lot of these companies wanting all this information and breaking anonymity, and like I said, even Blockstream, which everybody's excited about. I mean, you've got a VC there that hates anonymity. What do you expect? You're not. This isn't the animal, or this isn't the person that you slept with last night. You woke up and holy shit, the makeup's gone. And Bitcoin looks like crap. Okay, so it's a problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and it's there's kind of a broader problem too that you've been addressing lately with just the internet in general and privacy. And the internet is such a tool for liberation, but it's also kind of been being used as a tool for control lately. You had an episode called "Google is Evil," and I really liked it. I really enjoyed it, and I was kind of looking for you to kind of expound on that the "Google is Evil" phrase.
Well, sure. Well, I appreciate. Thank you for saying that, by the way, that you enjoyed it. But the Google is Evil is based around the fact that, like, in particular, you have in various times you have gatekeepers. When it was books, the gatekeepers was the Catholic Church. And then obviously Gutenberg set that all free. And I mean, you take your pick. There's always gatekeepers at some point. And one of the beauties, and you can look at the way the internet was marketed in the 90s. This is, again, you can go look up. You can watch on YouTube. Watch even Microsoft, of all things, watch Microsoft ads from the 90s, and you're going to see what they anticipated the internet looking like, what they were trying to build. And what they're trying to build was like the store of all knowledge. You could go look up a book and you could read it, any book that's ever been written in history and all this stuff. And so it seemed like a very open way of doing things. And for a while, I think it's true that it was. And I think a lot of people are still hooked on that notion that the internet is, freeing up knowledge and all this. But now that has changed. It's these companies in particular, you're getting gatekeepers. In a lot of ways, the gatekeepers are actually like the web browser itself. Google Chrome, we've seen countless occasions where Google Chrome is strong-arming, okay, if you're using this version of SSL, we're not going to allow it to be. And they'll say like that they're doing all these protections for you, enforcing all of these standards on you, for your own protection. But then what's the very nature of a protection racket? Control over you, and so Google being evil, I tie that up into the fact that they are becoming not unlike, in the Gutenberg analogy, the Catholic Church, to where they are controlling, and you're seeing it in Europe, like I mentioned. In Europe, and granted, people will say, well, it's Europe that's pushing it onto Google or whatever. But Google's due diligence would be to say, screw off. I mean, disobedience is man's original virtue, and they should be fully enacting that. And their bottom line be damned. So they're willing to play ball with governments. That's a bottom line there. But also the fact is that if something disappears on Google, people see this as a viable way to control information. But that's just it. The phrase is you are controlling information. You are controlling, and the very nature of control, in my opinion, is evil. Outside of self-governance, it's evil. So that's I guess what I have to say on that.
And you see that clamping down is a general trend for the future, in regards to Google or even something like coming in there. Are you still there?
Oh, gotcha.
Did I? Okay.
Go ahead. Like you said, some companies were coming in or something.
Oh, I was saying, do you view the clamping down and just trying to control as a general trend for the future in regards to Google or even something like net neutrality, where you have governments trying to influence, the net? What do you think about that? Is it a general trend towards control with the internet that we currently have?
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. There was a great article by Julian Assange about a month or two back, maybe, and he pretty much laid out the history of the internet, and he generally showed where everything could have been different, where what Google's doing right now, where you take your pick of the companies doing right now, could have been avoided. You know, all these systems of control that have been implemented onto the internet could have been completely avoided from the very beginning, and it was all ignored. And so, there is, yeah, it's being built from the ground up to be far more centralized, which is what Google's all about in the first place. Centralization is the antithesis of freedom, which I think Bitcoin has shown that very well, along with a lot of other blockchain technology. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the system itself inherently is about reining in, about control, as it is. And I wish I saw it. I mean, granted, I'm only 33, so I was using the internet in my teens, but I wish I knew. I wish I knew really, really early on. And because I give examples of technologies that have been around just as long as the internet, are still as adaptable as the internet, like Usenet, which is different from the World Wide Web, which is what generally people mean when they say the internet. And these things are completely decentralized. No one can control them. It's very difficult to even market on them. There's a whole slew of problems. And it's funny because everybody just left, or not everybody, but the mainstream left these technologies in the dust, even though they're still totally viable. And they even use modern things, like it allows you to, download movies or whatever else. You take your pick of it. So it's interesting that the choices were there for far more adaptable technology and far superior technology to be used, and those choices weren't made. By whoever, me included, I guess. But now we can kind of see it.
Are you excited about any alternative systems or projects coming out that have new ways, decentralized internets or something like that, just alternative ways to decentralize it? Anything exciting in particular?
Sure, certainly MaidSafe tops the list, I think, for a lot of people. We're all very excited about that. There's a great team over there, great people with a good attitude. And attitude's everything. I don't, I have a saying, I don't believe in following the money, I believe in following the attitude. And the attitude there is great, but there's certainly others. And I want a bunch of these things. That's the thing, too, is that one of the main issues is that there's a singular internet. If you had choices, to bounce around or whatever, then none of this control would matter because you just leave and go over here, or whatever. And so I think, again, MaidSafe, there's ZeroNet, there's, RetroShare. There's a few different technologies out there, some of which are already up and running that can do this. And really, another thing, too, is mesh networking. And, in fact, I'm really shocked with mesh networking in general, which this is the idea of a decentralized connectivity, of all being on a similar network, but its points of transmission are all over the place. It's not servers, central servers by any means. And I think part of the reason, because I don't really see a good reason why it shouldn't be used and why people wouldn't want to use it in the first place and be dumping tons and tons of money into it. Because we look at the big boys like Facebook and Google and Elon Musk even and all these guys, and they're trying to create, just more efficient ways, quote-unquote efficient ways, or ways to spread the internet that we have. And mesh networking, by and large, could solve a lot of this, and so I'm not sure why. The only conclusion I can come to as to why they are not interested in doing this is because they know that they'll lose control. If mesh networking, if multiple internets occurred, they would lose control. But at the same time, ironically, they are trying to wrap people up into their ecosystems. I mean, Google's ecosystem. Why do is the iPad the best tablet out there? Sure, I'd say that. Okay, but most people will only want an Android phone for whatever reason. I mean, it's the most popular thing out there. But so why do people kind of stick with one system? Because it's so easy. The way they have everything so centralized, and for all your settings to go across the board, you end up buying an Android tablet instead of getting the best tablet in the biz. And I'm not promoting either of those, but I'm just saying that. So you have this weird. It's not that. Yeah, it's tough to kind of lay out because it seems like such a big overarching plan. But I think they realize that they need to get people like tied in to these systems. Otherwise, when independent people come out with things like Bitcoin, like mesh networking and whatever, they're going to see the real beauty of it and they're going to run to it. So hook people while you can. Get their whole lives on Google, get their whole lives on Apple, get their whole lives on Amazon. That way they just don't want to leave.
Well, and it's almost fascinating in like an evil genius kind of way, the addictive nature of social media and things like Facebook. Sure. It's geared to suck you in and make you waste hours on it. And I found myself doing this. I'm completely guilty of this myself.
Me too.
I mean, it's very addicting, and it just kind of appeals to whatever part of that brain, whatever part of your brain that is. And I was actually reading an article lately that, maybe addiction stems from this lack of human bonding. And if you can get addicted to social media, then it's really wanting connection with people. You're wanting to establish connection with people over this kind of, electronic medium. And that's good in some ways, but I think it kind of, it could lead to, other problems. I mean, again, like when you're wasting a lot of time, you're just sucked into Facebook. Maybe you don't know there are other options because there's that huge distraction. And I think whether it's television or, whatever, everyone has their thing that they spend a lot of time on. And, maybe it is distracting on some level. But yeah, with like Facebook and Google, it is something, again, it's geniusly made, and you can tell it's obviously intentionally geared to just suck people in and get them addicted.
Yeah, I know. I agree, and it's interesting too because I mean, like one case of this would be like the phone company, and this is the problem that if you don't have actual choices, if you get stuck into a set ecosystem, you end up with things like Ma Bell. You end up with things like AT&T, where you will pay exorbitant prices for long distance and whatever else. Just because you kind of get hooked into wanting to get that that human connection, and I get it that you want that human connection, but I think where phones like the good old-fashioned landlines, quote unquote, not to say they're good, won out was that it never allowed your communication to go beyond the Dunbar number. Now the Dunbar number is the theory, the research theory that you can only handle like between 5 and 150 people meaningfully, conversing with them or connecting with them, whatever that looks like. And I think it's interesting because like Facebook, like I think a lot of people went out there to try and like max out their Dunbar numbers, and that's what got so exciting in the early aughts with MySpace and maybe just the internet in general with chat rooms and AOL and all that stuff. But it does become addicting. But I think what happens is, and I think I'm going to guess that social media, unless people start uploading their brains, which is a terrible idea, social media is going to really fall away. It's going to fall apart. And like Facebook knows this because they're testing apps now that only let you communicate with 40 people at a time. You can only have like 40 friends. I think they realize that humans cannot handle meaningfully, and that they will run away, or who knows, maybe they'll off themselves, sadly, whatever the case may be, that the systems that exist now, can't be.
Yeah, so I think maybe we've almost reached peak Facebook. I mean, I find myself, getting overwhelmed with it a lot of times too, and having to separate and just like tap out, like, this is just overstimulation, I guess, for me. But yeah, I have to take a break from it, and I think there is something to the Dunbar number, and I can't even handle like over 10 people or so. I mean, it gets overwhelming for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and what can you do with 100 or 500 friends or 5,000 friends or whatever? I mean, just think about it. Like the fact that you are, it's an old saying, but you're talking at people. You're not actually talking to people. And what a waste. Unless, you're just kind of like marketing out to people. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for that, okay? But actually, Prince, the artist Prince, he had a great song on a new album that just came out called Clouds. And he says, he's talking about how like everybody's a celebrity now, all the world's a stage, what's even real? And it's true, because if everybody's acting like they're on TV, You know, I mean, and that's the thing. You know, people act like they're rock stars on these social media networks. I mean, you're not getting anything real. It's all farce. It's as much a farce as the system that Bitcoin was trying to bring down, that the internet was supposedly going to bring down, and all of this. You know, you can't help but come to realize it. So if it helps people realize it faster, great. But I don't know. I'm impatient.
Yeah, I definitely feel you with the impatience, and it is a show. It's the world's kind of a stage, and a lot of it is just trying to boost signals and stuff like that. Are you familiar with the series Black Mirror?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. That's good stuff. Boy. Yeah. It's the modern day Twilight Zone, and it's really like I mean, it brings up some really interesting concepts.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying it lately, and because I kind of came from, I wasn't a very tech savvy person. I learned more about Bitcoin. I've been learning more about tech in general, and it's really fascinating. But now I'm like watching Black Mirror, and it's kind of, some of it's freaking me out because it's becoming so present. It's a lot of the concepts are already here. For instance, there was I came across this website called InvisibleGirlfriend.com, where this app would basically text you pretending to be, your girlfriend, if you were texting in public or something and needing an excuse to leave you. But it was like this fake girlfriend that they would construct for you. And it reminded me of the Black Mirror episode where the woman's boyfriend or husband passes away, and they try to bring him back. Her friend gets her connected with this app who will like text and email back to her as if it's him, and it's just so creepy. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I watched this episode, and like literally, it was like a week later, I come across this website. It's like, it's here.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of the rate at which things are developing, like you could make this wild science fiction, show or whatever, and yeah, the next week, absolutely, suddenly it's all real. So, which is good for me because when I do a tech show, I'm never out of content. It makes my life easy. I'll admit that. So I shouldn't complain too much.
It is really fascinating, and I mean, it raises all of these, all of these ethical questions, and something I've kind of been interested in lately is kind of transhumanism and some of the, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I still don't know what to think, honestly. I'm kind of like, it's creepy, but I mean, it's kind of cool.
Sure. Well, okay, yeah. So the easy answer to get out of that is, of course, and this is what a lot of people will say, especially like in anarchist circles or freedom-minded people, liberty-minded people, is that, well, if the government's there, you might not want to be putting your brain into into some robot that could be controlled, right? I mean, that's not a good idea because who's the gatekeeper, like we were saying earlier? And with transhumanism in general, AI is a different story, and I wouldn't mind touching on that too. But like with transhumanism itself, it's something, if we're concerned about privacy, and some people would say the very nature of civilization was, privacy was the ability to build up walls around us. Not to say that so that we didn't connect with other people. I think that's a fallacy. But but privacy is a driving force in human evolution and advancement. And consider this. Actually, my girlfriend Stephanie Murphy, she said it was really a wild thought that I hadn't heard anybody else say. But if you upload your brain into a server or into this new android body that you get as a transhuman, your brain patterns are all going to go through something that's going to record and see all of that. And so, I mean, I don't know about you, but not that I'm a closed person by any means. I'm actually pretty open, but there's certainly some things I wouldn't want running through anybody's filter. I mean, I don't share everything on Facebook or Twitter. I mean, it's just that's crazy. And yeah, I think that's a pretty scary concept alone for the idea of uploading our brains. But with artificial intelligence, and that's maybe where people get a little more interested, is because a lot of people think that that's coming, that it's on its way, and they enjoy, kind of like that girlfriend app you talked about or whatever, but they enjoy how Siri can respond to you and help you out, or how Cortana or Google Now or whatever can really help you out. And the goal of these people, like Ray Kurzweil and some of these other, futurists and transhumanists and technologists and whatever, is to create something that, at the very least, matches human ability, and most likely, as they'll admit, will surpass human conscious ability, thought processes. And so, and this is a point I bring up on my show often enough, but like, nobody ever asks a lot of these technology people, why do you want to build this? No, really, why do you want to build this? And I think at the end, they'll come up with a whole bunch of like, nonsense of, oh, I want to protect your kids, or we'll use it to make you more efficient, or all these little things. But none of that really adds up, because there's plenty of ways to do this stuff without hashing out billions of dollars at some kind of issue or at creating new life. But that's just it. Is at the end they're creating new life. And I can't help but think that it's just that artificial intelligence, the whole quest for that is neo-slavery. I mean, you're creating a consciousness that's incomparable to a human being. That's the goal, or if not better, and yet you want it to just be some tool to help you cure cancer. How insulting is that? I mean, just imagine being your parents coming up to you, hey, I had you so that you can go cure cancer. I mean, wait a minute, what about my autonomy? What about what I wanted to do? I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to go do this. No, you don't understand. You were built for this, and so you go do this. I mean, that's the very notion of the lack of choice, and the lack of choice at the end of the day in the dictionary equates to slavery. And so I think artificial intelligence is, by and large, almost unethical, because it is, in my opinion, neo-slavery. Transhumanism, boy, yeah, it doesn't excite me. I'm far more interested in cryonics. If people want to live longer, look into freezing yourself. I think that's very legitimate, and there's great companies that already will do it for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have heard that before, and I wasn't sure how far along the technology is with that now. Is it gotten to a point where it's, looking like a viable option? Or, I mean, I know several people have already done it, but...
cryonics?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a company, Alcor, I believe it's called. They actually will, when you die, they'll either freeze your head or they'll freeze your whole body. You get the choice, and you wear this like a thing around your neck, or just a little metal bracelet or whatever. It looks like one of those bracelets that the older people had to wear back in the 80s. Help! I've fallen and I can't get up, that sort of thing. And you wear that, and then it gives instructions: call this phone number, and then a helicopter flies out, grabs your body, and they throw you in the cryo tank as fast as possible. So essentially that does work, as best as we can understand it. Now, nobody's been unfrozen yet, but then that's, of course, the bet, is that by the time you're ready to be unfrozen, that technology will exist. So I'm just saying that as far as like a better bet, if you're wanting to live, and who doesn't want to live forever? I get it, I do too. Okay, but as far as the best bet, I don't. Transhumanism just creates so many potential problems as far as technology goes, and things that need to be developed that really debase the human condition, and that aren't life-affirming at all, in my opinion. That cryonics is a far more interesting aspect to go, and a much better place to be throwing money at, in my opinion.
So, say you're frozen. What is your vision of the future 100 years if you were to be unfrozen from maybe this point in time? What do you see happening, kind of the good and the bad, 100 years from now?
Well, the caveat to that is that I've actually been to the future, and no, I did a funny episode. A lot of people really liked it, that I called 2099, where I kind of broke the rules, broke the fourth wall, whatever you want to call it, in showbiz, and I ended up going into the future with it. Pretended that I was doing a show from the year 2099 on a floating city and all this business. As far as what I actually think the future is going to look like in 100 years, I don't think, there's a lot of people, especially in the spaces that we frequent, or at least that I frequent, that talk about, oh, government's going to come down in 5 years, the dollar's going to crash in no time, it's going to all fall apart, and you better be in the right place at the right time, otherwise, you're screwed. And I don't really believe any of that. I think that it will not look terribly unlike what we have right now at the end of the day. I can theorize like potentially how bad it could get, but I think it'll look a lot like now. But what I do think will exist, is there will be a parallel society. There will be a parallel community or communities of people that will, with cryptography, with things like Bitcoin, made safe, and some other technologies, that they'll actually exist completely alongside the conventional system that we'd think of now. And so because I don't, I've been hearing it my whole life that, oh, the dollar's going to crash next year, the dollar's going to crash next year. I mean, you can't imagine how many times I've heard it. And if anything, the dollar's doing great right now. I mean, if you're long on the dollar, you're rocking, okay? And in fact, and there's economists that will tell you, like if you ask some serious economists, they'll tell you, no, actually this year, like there's one Harry Dent, he wrote a book called The Demographic Cliff, where he's talking about 2014 on is going to be pretty rosy. So I don't see things getting bad, but there's still, the system inherently is violent. The system inherently is malicious towards, the human condition, towards human advancement, and with freedom and life-affirming principles involved. So I do see this technology allowing for there to be, again, a completely parallel society, and how advanced that parallel society will get, I can't even really imagine. But it will allow people to exist without, in my opinion, without social constraints, and with about 99% without like economical constraints. Because I imagine at some point you still have to pay taxes somewhere. I don't know. I mean, unless people do the Seasteading Institute or whatever. I don't know. But I think the future, is in one respect it's terrible, but on the other respect, it's actually really good, because I think that there will be that parallel society that will just figure out how to coexist. The remora on the shark, in many ways.
Yeah, and I try not to be too utopian when I think and I talk about technology, because it is quite a tool for liberation, and it all depends on how people use it and how they kind of put it into action. And I think there are a lot of people who have legitimate concerns that it's something that can be used to control people more. But I think ultimately, as much as government can use it to control people, it's always going to be several steps ahead of legislation. Especially unless government evolves as an idea, it's
Right.
still going to be far behind technology.
Yeah, government's slow, and that's a great thing. You don't want things to speed up. In fact, I mean, most of the institutions, at least in the United States, that we have as far as government go, were designed for a system they used horse and buggy. Good. Let it stay that way. Let it be so far behind the times that it doesn't matter. But at the same time, that also, in my opinion, kind of creates a real, I don't want to say a vigilance. I don't like that term, but I'll use it. It requires a real vigilance on the part of just about anyone else, because the government can't keep an eye on technology, nor do you want it to. But at the same time, you've got these people that, really these brains. I mean, you read an article from like Larry Page. He wrote his vision of the future recently. I think it was in the Financial Times. And I mean, he's just got like these whacked out ideas, and you can just look at them and you can say, okay, what would it take for him to get that? Oh, he's going to have to be, Stalin, or he's going to have to be, some kind of dictator. It's going to have to be centrally planned. That's all that they're about. And again, central planning is about control. It's not about freedom. So you do have to keep an eye. Technology is not talked about enough. Religion, like in the workplace, you can't talk about politics, can't talk about religion, right? Because of the severity of those conversations, but technology should be right up there. I'm not saying I want to ban people what people are talking about. I'm just saying it's as severe as a conversation as politics and religion. But no one treats it as such. They kind of just let the brains do what they do, and that's not a good idea, because some of these people have some very strange notions of where they want the future to go.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and we benefit so much from these apps that make things so convenient for us. And so many people use technology every single day without maybe even thinking about it, without thinking about how far we've come along and the direction it could possibly go. So I do hope that even if you're just using weird apps on your phone to make your life a little bit easier, hopefully that can spark some kind of light in the mind to look into other things, other things that are happening in the tech space. Because yeah, it's never too late to learn more about that. It's the general inevitable direction things are going to be heading, and I think in general it's very much a good thing. I try not to. Again, I try to be as balanced as possible, and that's always difficult, when thinking about these things. But yeah, it's I don't know. We'll definitely see, and I really hope people kind of can use it to become more aware, again, of the general trajectory of things, and just be more interested in it, because there is a lot of fascinating things going on, and if it is just a matter of talking about it more at the office or just wherever, I think that's a huge step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It is about talking about it, and then it's time, eventually comes. If it's something that actually like really helps people, it'll get there. Marketing or not, honestly, it'll still get there.
Definitely. Well, it's been great talking with you. It doesn't look like we have a whole lot of questions from the audience, but I do want to give you a chance to kind of, give your final thoughts on
Sure,
anything.
absolutely. Yeah, okay. Let's see. So the universe started when, no, okay. Yeah. No, I'm glad that there are forums. As much as I may have complained about the internet during this, I'm glad that there are forums where people can get their voices heard. One of the reasons I do a podcast, I'm also a game developer, and so many of these technologies make all that very easy now to do because I don't have a whole lot of time to make this stuff happen, and I certainly don't make a lot of money from it. But I'm glad that there are people out there and that some of this technology does inspire people to look into what's actually possible. I'm glad your show's out there, and it's things like that. People really don't, they don't appreciate the real power of the spoken word in a lot of ways, and I think that's the thing, is that people just need to start having the real conversation about this, because I don't think people were having the conversation. They were just saying that, oh, that kid's on the computer all the time. That's not a conversation. It's an insult. And so I just, what I really want is for, and I'm glad, again, venues like your show, my show, whatever, where these ideas can get meted out. And I hope that happens more, that people start talking about it more, and at the very least ask the questions, because you don't have to. I certainly don't expect people to understand like technology to where they're writing everything in assembly language or something like that. That's crazy. No one needs to be doing all of that. But I think if people just ask questions like, so why do you want to do this? Why do you want to build this? What's on your mind here? What's your attitude about this? And I think people will just intrinsically, especially if they can get it face to face, will just intrinsically kind of see when something is not helpful to them, or when something is, yeah, I don't trust that so much. So I just, yeah, my thoughts on everything is just people need to start talking about technology, and you can't stop the forward march of technology. I say this all the time. I know you can't stop it. It's been going for 6,000, 10,000, however many thousands of years, but you can certainly steer which way it goes, and you have the choice of either it being in a life-affirming direction or in a direction of mental or maybe even physical slavery. Depending on how far, how apocalyptic perhaps it gets. So people do have the choice still right now. Where none of this stuff is normal. The internet's not normal. None of it's normal. So just start talking, start conversing, and yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, I'll take an amen to that. That's great.
And where can people keep up with your work?
Sure. Sovryn.tech.com. Now, that's Sovryn, and that's, of course, because I'm Brian Sovryn. So Sovryn.tech.com is where you can find just about anything that I do right now. There's links to Twitter and all those other great sites where you can follow me. My Twitter handle is the same, @SovrynTech. With the RY and all that. Also, I do have, just real quick, I do have a game coming out actually April 5th of 2015 of this year from Zomia Offline Games. It's called Hyperchronius. There is a ZomiaOfflineGames.com, but you really won't see anything there yet. But I've got a lot of pretty wild surprises coming in the near future, so do keep a lookout for that.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for talking with me, Brian. It's always a pleasure. And check out Sovryn Tech. It's a great podcast, and I'm looking forward to that game too. So I don't have a guest for next week, but I will be continuing the show most likely. And until next time, keep calm and encrypt on.